Good morning, Metaverse. I'm Thor with the Red Hand, and there is one resource that is more rare and harder to acquire than Arco on MRZ 17. That is time. That's something I have very little of right now, which is why you haven't seen me for a while. But there is a discussion going on in Star Atlas that I think is so important that I needed to make time, find time to make a video and to articulate my thoughts on this. I have heard some good conversation about this. But there's going to be an Atlas brew coming up on Wednesday, and I believe they're going to have this as a center topic to discuss. And I'd like to bring up some points so that it can be discussed about there. To give a little background of this, Michael Wagner, a late night Discord discussion, brought up some theory crafting of the intent was to find a way to bring value to GAO ships, galactic asset offered ships that were sold directly from Automata. Some of the original ships, these would be ships that are not crafted by players, but were originally generated by Automata, known as GAO ships. So how to bring value to that in a way to bring value and give something to those OG supporters that have been with Star Atlas from the very beginning, which I always approve of and appreciate because the Star Atlas community has been very dedicated, and that dedication should be rewarded if possible. And this was just theory crafting, but it ignited a whole conversation. I mean, I woke up at 4 a.m. I was gonna get going, and I started reading through the Discord, and it took me another 2 hours just to get caught up with what had been discussed. And then for now the next week or so, we've been talking about this insurance and what does it mean for the high risk zone. What would that do as an effect? I think it brought up some really good points. Now, a spoiler alert. I am against it. I am against having this built-in insurance specifically for GAO ships and the high-risk zone. And we'll get into that in a moment. And please hear this out. But there have been a lot of good discussions, and I wanted to highlight some of that so you can get caught up and ready to go when there's further discussion in, I believe, the Atlas Brew coming up this Wednesday. There was discussion on the Atlas Brew 102 towards the end of the Atlas Brew, sometime around minute 40, I believe, maybe minute 30. There was some good discussion about this concept, the concerns, both the pros and the cons to it. So definitely check out that Atlas Brew. Also, Beyond the Horizon did a recap episode and did a good job. He articulated some of the aspects of it and gave some other links to other recaps and summaries of the discussion. To try to catch up to all of it would be a Herculean effort. But look through the economic Discord for Star Atlas and engage in that conversation. Now, here's the main points, or the main point that I wanted to get to. Newt articulated this pretty well in the Atlas Brew, and as he usually does. But for having, if you were to add insurance built in to a ship and have it specifically rated to the high risk zone where your ship is no longer permanently burned, but you pay a fee and you wait time, you have fundamentally changed a core characteristic of the game Star Atlas. Okay, one of the main things that separated Star Atlas when I was looking at it as just the concept back when it was just posters and a white paper, the characteristic that separated from everything else was that you had real assets that could be burned. Like, you don't get to respawn. There is no second life for that ship. If it is destroyed, it is gone. It is destroyed. It is final, and brings real consequences to a video game. Which, video games are built a dime a dozen, and so what if you die? So what if your character is destroyed? The games that are the most hardcore games, which then build a very strong following behind them, in my experience, are the ones that have real consequences where you could actually lose that resource. And this is scary for a lot of people, for everybody. It should be scary. It's scary for me, and I want to participate in it. That's an adrenaline rush. That's one of the draws of it, and that had been part of the concept of Star Atlas from the very beginning. It is a core characteristic of an entire area where the whole physics is built off of real asset destruction. That's the high risk zone. That's what defines it. Also, skirting around that is going to change the behavior of the people that are actually in the high risk zone. So if you have real final consequences, you're going to behave a lot more civil in the high risk zone than if you had no consequences. You see this in human behavior all the time. When consequences are removed, your behavior becomes uncivilized. You do things just on a whim, and that kind of environment, that kind of community, is not really one that I would look forward to. So I hope that articulates the way I feel about the core characteristic of Star Atlas. And to change that, I would be against. And so when we're talking about insurance and giving the option of buying insurance to prevent total asset destruction, that is going to make a lot of changes. That's going to have a lot of unintended consequences that we have to take a look at. And so let's talk about like the benefit argument that I've heard most commonly is, well, how do we expect to have a large number of people want to go into the high risk zone, or how can we get more activity in the high risk zone if the consequences are so final? Um, the finality of total ship destruction is going to scare a lot of people away from even going into the high risk zone. And people have paid a lot of money for the ships and assets in the game, and shouldn't they get the ability to go in there too? And to that premise, I think that premise is actually turned upside down and backwards. Just because you've bought a bunch of ships, the defining characteristic of Star Atlas isn't how much money you have spent. That's not the equalizer. The equalizer in Star Atlas is and should be skill and your willingness to take a risk, right? Your cojones, you know. Do you got brass balls? Do you have nerves of steel? Are you an ooster, or do you have specific augments as a mud? I'm not sure what Omus do about this, but that's the equalizer in Star Atlas. That's a core characteristic of Star Atlas that's different than other games. It's you don't just get to go everywhere because you've put so much into your assets. That's step one. How do we get so many people into HRZ? I don't think we want everybody to be in the HRZ. It's not made for everybody. It's made for the people that are willing to take the risk to go there. And that brings a lot of value to it. And to skirt around that, um, I believe would take value away from the HRZ and to the game as a whole. Now, there was a lot of discussion about, well, how are you going to get a large number of people, hundreds of thousands of people, to come and play? For the people that want to play a game and not have full ship destruction, there is an entire zone for that. It's called the medium risk zone, where your ship isn't going to be destroyed, where you will lose resources, so there are consequences. It's not without consequences. It's going to be a medium risk. But if your ship gets destroyed, you'll have to repair it, and then a cooldown time, I would assume, and then you can come back into the game and play more. Okay. Then there's a safe zone where there's no destruction, where you don't have to worry about uh, getting attacked, and that's for the people that don't want to play in a risk on scenario. So I thought that as a concept was brilliant from the very beginning. You have three different categories for three different type of players. The majority of people, I'd imagine, is going to be in the middle medium risk zone, and it's going to be a lot of fun in there. That's where I'm going to spend a majority of my time. The medium risk zone is where you can play and get in combat. You can die, have your ship destroyed. All you have to do is repair it. You pay some fees. You lose some of your resources. There are real consequences. It is inconvenient. And that was one point about the insurance and putting a long delayed time, cooldown time to get your ship back, and a 20-30% cost. 20-30% of what the ship costs in order to get it back. The argument was, well, that's still going to hurt real bad for anybody that loses their ship in the high risk zone. Yeah, but it is very different. And what you're really describing is the medium risk zone. So instead of changing the characteristics of the high risk zone, why don't you advocate for increasing the danger in the medium risk zone? Or make a second medium risk zone, a medium risk zone and a medium risk zone, and leave the high risk zone to the hardcore players. And you know those are just a couple thoughts that had been talked about, and my initial reaction to that. I see there's benefit in and giving people options, but I don't think that changing an entire portion, a whole zone of Star Atlas, is a good idea. What this brings out, though, is I think a real need or a desire to have some type of insurance policy, to have some kind of insurance provider for people that do want to go in the high risk zone but don't want to risk their entire asset value. And I'm okay with that. A third party insurance company that wants to insure that ship, but that ship, when it goes in high risk zone and it's destroyed, the NFT gets burned. The insurance company would provide the asset value so you could buy another one. That's how insurance works. If I own a building and I have insurance on it and it burns down, I don't have that building anymore. I get the insurance money after they've found every way not to pay me, but you get the insurance money and then you rebuild that building. That's the idea. That's how insurance actually works in the real world. So if that works the same way in Star Atlas, that's totally fine. But the asset should be burned because that's the characteristic of the high risk zone. But there's clearly a need and a desire for it. So maybe there's someone that wants to kind of create that and provide that. I think there's a really good point there, and I'd be fully on board and support something like that. Um, the other aspect of the insurance, where it is just for the AtlasGAO ships, I am against that as well, because that separates and devalues to a great degree ships that are manufactured by players, right? That takes the power away from the people to be able to create the same kind of ships as Automata, ultimately. Which, there's a big value for Automata to be able to create these more valuable ships with an insurance capability, to keep these rare resources, which those ships. Well, I'm diverging into a different topic, so I'll finish this one. Um, there's a lot of value to Automata as a company to keep that power to create these ships that have a built-in insurance. But power to the people, man. Like, you've done so good sticking with that, and You should not break from the way that you've behaved as a company. Bring the power to the people. Allow the people to build the same ships that Automata has already seeded into the universe. Don't make a change there, because then you have changed the power structure. And power to the people, you can just stop saying that, because that's not what's happening. Okay. Um, that's one reason I don't think that they're going to actually do this. But it's great to talk about this as concepts, and going forward, when the DAO is in charge, how do we address these issues? How do we stick to principles, and maintain the quality of the game as it develops? So that's my feeling on that. And lastly, the last thing I'm going to go into is the rarity of ships. If the GAO ships aren't destroyed permanently, even if they have the potential of being the fee paid for and a cooldown time waited, that's going to reduce the rarity of those assets. The burning of assets is one, the economic driver that is causing the demand for resources to build new ships, and also the assets itself. I mean, one of the reasons that I wanted to get ships early on was because those ships were, as time went on, going to become more and more rare, because people are going to destroy those ships. People go into high risk zone. You're going to lose, your F4s. Right? I've got two F4s, and I think they're really cool ships. When they start getting destroyed, they're going to get rarer and rarer. And if I've been a skilled pilot, or if I've been cautious, if I have played the game, not just the combat game, if I've played the game and I've developed social communities, if I've developed networks and alliances, and I have protected my assets both by what I do and the people I surround myself with, if I've really played this game well, then I'm going to have these OG assets that are rare and rarer as time goes on. That's a value add to the project as a whole, which would be greatly reduced, if not eliminated, by having this insurance concept. So again, changing that core characteristic has a lot of unintended consequences. That if they were to do this, opening up Pandora's box and trying to put it all back together in a way that's still just as good, if not better, than the original, I think that's going to be extremely difficult to be able to pull off. And there's several alternate ways to achieve similar goals. And my stance is, do no harm first to the project, and then look for value add things that improve the project. But don't damage it. Don't do negative things. Don't take away from the project as sort of your first step. So hopefully these points that I brought up, the concerns or the principles that I've talked about, are useful to work through these debates and come up with a resolution to this in the near future. I'd like to continue having discussions about this until there's an official statement on that issue, but then to remember these discussions for future debates that come up, because there's going to be more things like this. Some will be good ideas, some will ultimately be good for the project, and some won't. And so thanks for watching all the way through. Try to listen in or be a part of the Atlas Brew. I will not be there on Wednesday. I teach my kid. I homeschool, and it's co-op day, so I'm teaching my kids at that time during the Atlas Brew. It kills me. I get done at 2 o'clock, so just when the Atlas Brew ends. But I will be listening to all that and encourage and look forward to further discussion in Discord. Excuse me, in Discord and other places. So if you can do that, then today was a good day. Good morning, Metaverse.